In the history of North America, many Native American tribes forced colonial empires to tread carefully, thanks to their strength and unbreakable spirit. But among the hundreds of tribes, only a few are remembered as names that truly instilled terror not just in white settlers, but in other native tribes as well. Of those, none stood out more than the Comanche. Once dubbed the Lords of the Plains, even hearing their name was enough to make people tremble. In the Ute language, Comanche means one who always wants to fight, or simply, enemy, a name that reflected a warrior spirit and an uncompromising drive for confrontation. The origins of the Comanche trace back to the Shoshone people, who lived in the western United States, in a region known as the Great Basin, a harsh, desolate land, yet rich in resources. Anthropological research has shown that the Comanche and the Shoshone shared many similarities in language, customs, and daily life. Their language belonged to the Uto-Aztecan family, a vast linguistic network spread across the western U.S. When the Spanish introduced horses to the continent in the 16th century, it not only revolutionized transportation for native peoples but also reshaped their survival strategies and methods of warfare. At first, horses fell into the hands of tribes influenced by Spanish colonization, such as the Pueblo. Through trade, horses gradually made their way to the Comanche, who quickly seized the opportunity, trading buffalo hides, captives, or other goods to obtain horses. Once they had them, the course of American history changed forever. No native tribe in American history could rival the Comanche in horsemanship. They didn't just use horses as transport, they viewed them as symbols of power and social standing. Comanche children were taught to ride from a very young age, both boys and girls trained to master horsemanship to an extraordinary degree. They even had a unique and brutal method of taming wild horses. When they spotted one, they would lasso its neck and choke it until it passed out. Then, they would revive it by gently blowing into its nostrils, clean it, trim the hair around its eyes, and fit it with a bridle. The wild horse would then be paired with a tamed mare to get accustomed to human presence. After a few days of freedom, the horse would still return to camp and begin to bond. For full training, they would lead it into deep water or sandy creek beds to reduce resistance and soften any falls. William Blakemore, an Englishman who lived with the Comanche for 8 years, once remarked, "On foot, they're slow and clumsy, but on horseback, they're the most graceful and daring riders in the world." In battle, the Comanche moved like storms across the field. They hid their entire bodies behind their horses, exposing only one foot for balance, and from beneath the neck or over the back of their mounts, they would fire arrows or bullets with deadly precision. Every warrior had a favorite warhorse, used only in combat. Even Comanche women were fearless riders, lassoing antelope, chasing buffalo, and riding into battle alongside men. With military strength came territorial ambition. The Comanche did not make peace easily. They became infamous for brutal raids, massacring European settlers, ambushing wagon trains, and making life nearly impossible for the French, Spanish, and Americans who tried to take their lands. Spanish colonists once admitted that it was the Comanche who prevented their expansion northward for nearly 50 years. U.S. General James Wilkinson called them the most formidable indigenous group on the continent. While early on they were branded as horse thieves, over time, their name became synonymous with blood-soaked night raids. These attacks were so terrifying that northern Spanish and Mexican settlers began calling the regions under their terror Comancheria, the domain of the Comanche. Whenever white settlers crossed their territory, the Comanche struck with lightning speed, stealing horses and later selling them to the Spanish, Mexicans, or Americans. Although their population numbered only around 40,000, each Comanche owned 2 to 3 horses of precious asset. In Comanche society, young warriors were expected to prove themselves in frequent raids, demonstrating their ability to kill and steal. This was the only path to honor, wealth, and respect within their clans. But what truly made them feared was their cold-blooded cruelty. Comanche women were known for inventing terrifying methods of torture. Once you fell into their hands, Death became a mercy worth begging for. S.C. Gwynn, in his book Empire of the Summer Moon, asserted that no other tribe in the history of Spanish, French, Mexican, Texan, or American colonization inflicted as much widespread devastation and death as the Comanche. There wasn't even a close second. He vividly described horrific tortures, gang rapes, and killings committed against white settlers. Men were slaughtered, women raped in groups, and even infants were murdered. T.R. Fehrenbach, in Comanche, The History of a People, recalled a tragic event at Fort Parker in 1836. About 100 Comanche horsemen rode toward the fort. One warrior waved a white flag to deceive the settlers. Benjamin Parker stepped out to negotiate only to be surrounded and killed with spears. The Comanche then stormed the fort with deafening war cries, killing the Frost father and son. John Parker was disemboweled, scalped, and left dying in agony. Granny Parker was pinned to the ground with a spear and subjected to unspeakable abuse until she died. Stories of Comanche brutality have endured through historical records. Prisoners burned alive over open flames. Castrated, scalped while still conscious. One of their most horrifying methods of torture involved burying captives up to the neck, slicing off their eyelids so their eyes would remain wide open, exposed to the blistering sun until death by starvation. Some documents record even more gruesome acts. Naked male captives tied over red ant beds, their genitals cut off and stuffed into their mouths, which were then sewn shut. Such were the Comanche, not merely warriors, but the embodiment of primordial terror in American history. In addition to the chilling tortures already mentioned, the Comanche practiced another ruthless form of punishment. They would sew prisoners into untreated animal hides and leave them under the sun. As the hide dried and shrank, it would constrict tightly around the victim's body, slowly suffocating them in unbearable pain. According to historian T.R. Fehrenbach, a Spanish account recounted how the Comanche tortured prisoners from the Tonkawa tribe by burning their hands and feet until the nerves were completely destroyed. Then they would amputate the limbs and apply fire once more to the fresh wounds. These Tonkawa victims were also scalped alive and had their tongues torn out to silence their screams. With that harrowing chapter of the Comanche closed, we now turn to another alliance that struck fear into the hearts of many. The Iroquois Confederacy, also known as the Haudenosaunee, or the Six Nations. This powerful alliance stands as a prime example of sophisticated indigenous political and social organization in North America. Its formation began with the union of the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca tribes, each playing a unique and strategic role within the alliance. The Mohawk, stationed in the east, stood out for their early contact and trade with European settlers. The Oneida originated near the Great Lakes. The Onondaga held the central region of present-day New York, while the Cayuga and Seneca resided to the west and south, each contributing their own strength to solidify the Confederacy. The name, Iroquois, was not one they chose for themselves. It was given to them by their arch-rivals, the Algonquin, who called them by a word meaning rattlesnake. This name alluded to their uncanny ability to strike with lethal precision before their enemies could even react. Iroquois warriors were known for silently ambushing and taking down their enemies in the blink of an eye. From a young age, Iroquois children were trained in the art of warfare, mastering bows, spears, and war clubs. Upon reaching adulthood, they would join raids against rival tribes and at times, even against white settlements. For them, fighting was not merely survival, it was a path to honor, prestige, and leadership. One of the Iroquois' most infamous punishments was forcing prisoners to run the gauntlet. The captive would be made to dash between two rows of warriors armed with thorny branches, spears, and clubs struck relentlessly as they ran. If they survived, they might be spared or even welcomed into the tribe, deemed strong enough to earn respect. This brutal initiation reflected the intense warrior discipline embedded in Iroquois culture. In the 17th century, the Iroquois entered a bloody period of conflict known as the Beaver Wars, as they sought to expand territory and control over the lucrative fur trade. One of their most decisive victories was the subjugation of the Susquehannock in what is now Pennsylvania. They also significantly weakened the Huron tribes around the Great Lakes, tightening their grip on the region. By the early 18th century, at the height of their power, the Iroquois Confederacy controlled a vast territory stretching from the western frontier all the way to northern Michigan, and as far south as the hills of Tennessee. What made them truly unique wasn't just their military might, it was their extraordinary ability to maintain unity among diverse member nations. A rare achievement among native alliances. This cohesion was most clearly demonstrated during the French and Indian War, when all Iroquois nations strategically aligned with the British. As the Bible says, though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of three strands is not quickly broken. Unity, indeed, is the foundation of strength. If the Comanche spread fear through brute force and chaos, the Iroquois brought dread with calculated tactics, strict organization, and unwavering resolve in war. Yet there was still one more tribe that even the U.S. military spent decades trying to subdue: the Apache. Part of the southern branch of the Athabascan language group, relatives of indigenous peoples in Alaska, Western Canada, and the American Southwest. The Apache inhabited a vast region stretching from the Arkansas River to northern Mexico. From central Texas to central Arizona, this harsh, arid, and mountainous terrain forged some of the most fearsome guerrilla warriors in Native American history. Surrounded by powerful forces, Spanish, Comanche, Ute, and later, American, the Apache not only survived but thrived. They were masters of guerrilla warfare, striking suddenly, disappearing without a trace. Armed with traditional bows and European firearms, they could launch volleys of arrows while riding full speed on horseback. Their tactics relied on stealth and lightning-fast ambushes, followed by rapid retreats into the rugged lands they knew better than anyone. What set the Apache apart was their incredible mobility. Whether on foot or horseback, they could cover hundreds of miles in a short time, raid settlements with precision, and vanish before any retaliation could be mounted. They quickly mastered Spanish horses and steel weaponry, lances, swords, knives, using them with terrifying effectiveness. U.S. General George Crook once described the Apache as the tigers of the human race, a phrase that captured their strength, endurance, and relentless tenacity. Some reports claimed Apache warriors could outrun cavalry units on foot, possessing stamina and speed unmatched by any army. In battle, they could shoot 7 arrows into the sky before the first one even touched the ground, proof of their speed and precision. But like the Comanche, the Apache were also infamous for their cruelty toward captives. Prisoners were skinned alive, burned to death. The children of enemies had their heads smashed against rocks. Within Apache society, anyone who devised a new method of torture would be celebrated and honored. They didn't just fight to survive, they fought to terrify. The Comanche, the Iroquois, and the Apache, each tribe left a distinct mark on the history of indigenous America. Though centuries have passed, their names still echo with power and fear. They were not merely warriors, they were living symbols of strength, savagery, and the unbreakable spirit of a people who once made an entire continent tremble.